All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This your girl Tiffany coming through right here live in effect. So, if you are watching from the YouTube channel, please make sure you share and subscribe to the channel. If you are watching from the Facebook channel, make sure you share this video. Um, and so yeah, make sure you guys do that. Today we're going to deal with the topic of daily Black history. Now, why do I always do daily Black history? Because it's very important to know about the historical events that took place on each particular day. So I may not be able to find all the information, but I try to find as much as I possibly can to bring it to the light and share as much as I can. So, and there are also other people that's dealing with information regarding to African American history or just African history in general. So, whatever information that I don't come across, you can always check out other people. You can always check out, New Black Knowledge channel. You can check out my brother JC Hughes. He got his own Facebook page called the African Cultural Diaspora Institute. You can look at that page as well. So, just to name a few. So yeah, it's always information out there, but you have to be the one to dig up those information. It's important for you to actually get access to the sources and look up for your just look it up for yourself. All right. So anyways, today we're going to deal with National Association of Colored Women Club. It was founded on this day, July the 21st, 1896. Right? So what I want to do is I'm gonna pull up some info. All right, and as a matter of fact, this is the picture right here. This is what the one of the earliest beginning of the organization, National Association of Colored Women Club, right here. All right, so let's look at the history behind it. All right. National Association of Colored Women Clubs. Okay, and then here's the logo. The logo say National Association of Colored Women Clubs, lifting as we climb. All right. So here's the origin, the history behind it. So the National Organization of Women's Clubs is an American organization that was formed in July of 1896 at the first annual convention of the National Federation of Afro-American Women in Washington, D.C., United States, by a merger of the National Federation of African American Women, the Women's Era Club of Boston, and the Colored Women's League of Washington, D.C., at the call of Josephine St. Pierre Ruffins. And now, who was Josephine St. Pierre Ruffins? All right, we're going to look into who she is in a minute. From 1896 to 1904, it was known as the National Association of Colored Women. It adopted the motto, lifting as we climb, to demonstrate to an ignorant and suspicious world that our aims and interests are identical with those of all good, aspiring women. When incorporated in 1904, NACW became known as the National Association of Colored Women's Club. All right. So here it is. The combination of three different organizations, right? Which is the National Federation of Afro-American Women, right? And also the Women's Era Club and the Colored Women's League of Washington, D.C. All three of these organizations combined together and to form what is known as the National Association Colored Women's Club. They combined all of this together, all right? And I'm gonna make sure that if I have enough time to, we're gonna go into the information on who the founders are. Well, We're gonna look up who Josephine St. Pierre Ruffins is. All right. When I get the time to do so. So let's continue on with the information. All right, so here's the history. All right, now here's the building right here, which is the National Association of Colored Women's Club headquartered in Washington, D.C. That's the headquarters building right there. You welcome, you welcome, you welcome, you welcome. Yes, thank you. All right, so it says in 1895, an observed man in an observed Missouri town sent a letter broadcast over this country in England, reflecting upon the character and morals of our women. So utterly false were the vile statement that the women were aroused as never before. And when Mrs. Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin, president of the New Era Club of Boston, called a meeting of protest in July of 1895, the indignant woman from north, south, east, and west flocked the classic hub and in no uncertain terms vindicated the honor of the race. The National Federation of Colored Women's Club was the result of that meeting, with Mrs. Booker T. Washington at its head. However, another national organization, the National League of Colored Women, with Mrs. Cook, née Helen Apple Cook, as president, exists at Washington, and the women soon realized that two organizations so identically similar could not work harmoniously as separate units. Therefore, the two organizations met in July of 1896, and each appointed a committee to arrange for consolidation, which was effected, and the National Association of CWC came into existence with Mrs. Mary Church Terrell of international fame as president. This joint session was attended by some of the most notable women of our race, among who were Harriet Tubman, Frances E. W. Harper, and Victoria E. Matthews, founder of the White Rose Mission of New York. Josephine S. Yates, teacher and writer, and others, Mrs. Ida B. Wells Burnett, and Elizabeth Lindsay Davis were the delegates from Illinois. Elizabeth Lindsay Davis, NACWC historian, 1933. So yes, let's talk about that. And speaking on the topic of Harriet Tubman, right? I'm not going to go into much detail about what Kanye West said until later on, but Harriet Tubman has a lot to add on to her name, okay? She took on a difficult task to free over more than 300 slaves and get them to the Underground Railroad, right? To get them away from being on a plantation, from dealing with the abuse they were suffering, to give them the opportunity so they can be able to roam freely and find somewhere to live so they can be able to raise their family, have a decent job, making decent income, or start their own businesses. Okay? So, and I want to say this to you guys. Stop listening to people like Kanye West. Stop listening to people like Kanye West when he says something like about Harriet Tubman, because it goes to show he doesn't really know history. All right. So this is why you need to study on your own and look up for yourself before you go listen to Kanye West. That's all I'm saying. So I don't want to get too much off the topic, but yeah, Harriet Tubman has done a lot and she has contributed. And one of these things that she contributed to was helping to find this organization called the National Association for Colored Women Club. That's one of the things that she did. Her and Ida B. Wells and Francis E.W. Harper. So let's go ahead and continue on. Now it says the National Association of Colored Women, later Association of Colored Women's Club, was established in Washington, D.C. on July 21st, 1896. The first of what would later become biennial convention meetings of the association was held at the 19th Street Baptist Church. The organizations attended this convention included the National Federation of Afro Women, the Women Era Club of Boston, and the National League of Colored Women of Washington, D.C. Right? We already read that. And the Women's Loyal Union, as well as smaller organization that has arisen from the African Americans Women's Club movement. These organizations and later others across the country merged to form the National Association of Colored Women. The national organization helped all African American women by working on issues of civil rights and injustice, such as women's suffrage, lynching, and Jim Crow laws. All right, and then we already talked about the founder. We already said Harriet Tubman, Margaret Murray Washington, right? Francis E.W. Harper, Ida B. Wells, Mary Church Terrell, right? And then it goes on to talk about the leading member were Josephine St. Pierre and Mary Church Terrell. And what was their original intentions of this organization? What their intention was to flourish evidence of the moral, mental, and material progress made by people of color through the efforts of our women. They organized to refute a letter written by James Jack, the president of the Missouri Press Association, challenging the respectability of African American women and referring to them as thieves and prostitutes. Whoa. This is why they did that, because there was a man by the name of James Jacks who was a misogynist. And he wrote a letter saying that pretty much comparing African American women to thieves and prostitutes. So they formed the organization to combat this stereotypical concept about Black women. To show that Black women have the ability to organize, have the ability to operate, and to be able to focus on current issues such as Jim Crow, the anti-lynching, also the right for women to vote. Yeah, Black women played a part in that for women's suffrage. It wasn't just Susie B. Anthony, okay? Black women played a part in that, but you hear a lot about Susie B. Anthony, right? Yeah, Black women fall in there too. However, it's very ironic because Black people didn't get a chance to vote until 1964, right? But we played a part into other people voting, right? So it's strange that white women got the right to vote before Black women did, but it was Black women that fought for that. Isn't that interesting? But let's continue on. It says during the next 10 years, the NACWC became involved in campaigns in favor of women's suffrage and against lynching and Jim Crow laws. They also led efforts to improve education and care for both children and the elderly. In 1918, when the United States entered the First World War, memberships in the NACWC had grown to an extraordinary 300,000 nationwide. So they started off small, right? And by the time the First World War took place, they had membership over 300,000 nationwide. So this organization had grown. Okay, so all right, so We're gonna look into a little bit about these two women right here, Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin and Mary Church Terrell. All right, so okay, so let's go down here. Where it says that the National Association of Colored Women was the most prominent organization formed during the African American woman suffrage movement. Wait a minute. We're going to look into that, right? One of these days, we're going to look into the African American woman suffrage movement. I'm going to make sure I'm going to make it my business to look into that. All right. Anyways, was due chiefly to efforts of Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin and Mary Church Terrell. Both women were educated and had economically successful parents. Now, this is let's look up who Josephine St. Pierre is. Okay, that is Josephine St. Pierre Ruffins. That's her. All right, so I'm about to read about her right now. Okay, so she was born on August 31st, 1842 in Boston. Josephine St. Pierre was the daughter of John St. Pierre, a successful clothes dealer from Martinique, and Elizabeth Matilda Mihinick from Cornwall, England. Her parents supported her going to school in Selman for its integrated school rather than attending segregated ones in Boston. There's Joseph St. Pierre flourished. All right. At the age of 16, she married George Lewis Ruffin, who became the first African American graduate of Harvard Law School. Among their early activities was recruiting black soldiers for the Union Army during the Civil War. Okay. After her husband died in 1886, Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin used part of her estate to fund Woman's Era, the first journal published by and for African American women. She was a vice president of the National Association of Colored Women. In 1910, Ruffin enlarged her social activism by helping form the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. She died in March of 1924. Now, this woman used her estate money, right, to fund the Woman's Era, which was a journal that was a publication journal for African American women. And then on top of that, she helped to form the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Josephine St. Pierre helped form the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. All right, so let's go down to Mary Churchill. Now, who was Mary Churchill? I'm sorry. Mary Churchill. All right, so this picture right here, This is Mary Church Terrell. All right. This is Mary Church Terrell. And what did she do? And who was she? Okay. So Mary Church Terrell was the daughter of Robert Church Sr., a former slave and reputed son of a white master, right? Church Sr. built a business and became one of the wealthiest black men in the South. He was able to send Mary to Oberlin College. And Oberlin College is in Oberlin, Ohio, where she earned both bachelor's and master's degrees. Years later, Mary Church Terrell spoke at the Berlin International Congress of Women, giving her speech in fluent German and French, as well as English. So she was very fluent in multiple language. She was able to speak German, she was able to speak French, and she was able to speak English. And also states that she was the only black woman at the conference. Terrell was elected as the first president of the National Association of Colored Women in 1896. She led the struggle in Washington, D.C. against segregation in public eating places, right? And succeeded in winning a court decision for integration there. Okay, so see, this was long before Dr. King and Medgar Evers started the whole freedom ride and the protest at the diner restaurants, right? This was way before. She was one of the first that was doing it. She fought against the segregation in public eating places, right? She did all that. And the organization that she was a part of, which was National Association of Colored Women, they did that. They organized that. But see, again, we don't hear about this kind of stuff. We don't get this kind of information. All right, and then it says, officer elected at the first meeting of the National Association of Colored Women. Okay, so it got the officer elected at the first meeting of the National Association of Colored Women on July 1896. Okay, the first president, Mrs. Mary Church here Terrell. Vice president, right? First vice president was Mrs. Fanny Jackson Coppin. The second vice president, Mrs. Josephine St. Pierre Ruffins. The third vice president, Francis E.W. Harper. The fourth vice president was Mrs. Joseph Salone Yates. The fifth vice president was Mrs. Sylvian Williams. The sixth vice president was Mrs. Ella V. Chase Williams. All right. Seventh vice president, Mrs. Lucy Thurman. And the recording secretary was Mrs. Alice Ruth Moore. And corresponding secretary was Miss A. V. Tompkins. Treasurer was Mrs. Ellen Apo Cook. And chairman of the executive committees was Mrs. Margaret Murray Washington. A national organizer, Mrs. Victoria Earl Matthews. Editorial staff, Mrs. Margaret Murray Washington, Dr. Rebecca Cole, Mrs. Rosa D. Bowser, and Mrs. Ida Wells Burnett, and Mrs. Frances J. Jackson. Ways and Means Committee, Mrs. J. Napier Kemp, Miss Lulu Chase, Mrs. Ella Muhammad, Mrs. Julia F. Jones, and here we go right here. Committee to draft Constitution, Miss A. V. Jones, Mrs. Anna Jones, Mrs. C. L. Franklin, Mrs. Rosa D. Browser, and Mrs. V. E. Matthews. Other significant attendees, Mrs. John H. Smith. Now, okay, so you all might wonder, well, why do they use their why would they call themselves Mrs. and use the men's entire name? Because at that time period, women who were married to their husband, right? If they were married, they would normally use Mrs. and, like, let's say you got Frederick Douglass, for example. Let's say his wife. All right, she will go by Mrs. Frederick Douglass. Sometimes it was permissible to do it that way, Mrs. Frederick Douglass, or she would go by Mrs. whoever that, whatever her name was, you know. So that's just how it was in that time period. So nowadays you don't have to do it like that, right? You got the choice of you either want to take on your husband's last name, or you don't have to take on his last name if you don't want to. But that's just the tradition of how they use the names, right? So they will go by Mrs. and then you got the male's first and last name. And that's just the way they did it. So, all right. So if you was ever wondering why, you know, the names were like that. All right. So let's go down here where it says the objective, right? What was the objectives of these organizations? All right. So here was the objectives: to work for the economic, moral, religious, and social welfare of women and children, to protect the rights of women and children, to raise the standard and quality of life in home and family, to secure and use our influence for the enforcement of civil and political rights for all citizens. All right, number 5, to promote the education of women and children through the work of effective programs. Number 6, to obtain for African American families the opportunity of reaching the highest levels of human endeavor. Number 7, to promote effective interaction with the organization Male Auxiliary. Number 8, to promote interracial understanding so that justice and good will may prevail amongst all people. Number 9, to hold informative workshops biennially at organizations' national convention. Those were the objectives, and they were good objectives. So let's these are the list of presidents in the past. Okay, Mary McLeod Bethune was the president at one time. Yep. These are they lists. And I have to look more information about these women too. And these are the list of the convention they had in Nashville, Tennessee, Chicago, Illinois. All right, Nashville was first in 1897. In 1899, Chicago, Illinois. In 1901, Buffalo, New York. 1904, St. Louis, Missouri. 1906, Detroit, Michigan. 1908, Brooklyn, New York. 1910, Louisville, Kentucky. 1912, Hampton, Virginia. All right, so let's go down. In 1918, Denver, Colorado. 1916, Baltimore, Maryland. Right, 1920, Tuskegee, Alabama. 1933, 35, Chicago, Cleveland, Ohio. 1937, Fort Worth, Texas. Then they had one in 1956 in Miami, Florida. And they had one in 1974 in Atlanta, Georgia. And 1992, Portland, Oregon. So You can also see information, and I'm on wikione.com. You can do further reading. The women of NACWC, strong, vigilant, innovative, and on whose shoulders we stand. Copyright 2012. Okay, it was revised in 2016 by the National Association of Colored Women's Club Incorporation. And here's some of their references. All right, and then you got the external links. Right, it says the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House, African American Women United for Change. And then over here it says the Black Women's Club Movement, Decolonizing Our History, retrieved on January 26, 2017. Who Are We archive at the Wayback Machine, NACW. So this is the list of information that could be looked into if you want to learn more. All right. So with that being said, well, you know what? Real brief. Let me look up something. You know why I have a little bit time left. Let's look up what. Hold on. Cause I wanted to look up what the about the African American women's suffrage movement. I want to look into that real quick before I log off. Let's look at that real quick. Yeah. Okay, so let's see something. All right, it says African American women began to agitate for political rights in the 1830s, creating female anti-slavery societies in New York and Philadelphia. These interracial groups were a radical expression of women's political ideas, and they led directly to voting right activism before and after the Civil War. Throughout the 19th century, African American women like Harriet Fortum Purvis, Mary Ann Shad Carey, and Frances Ellen Watkins Harper worked on two fronts simultaneously, reminding African American men and white women that Black women needed legal rights, especially the right to vote. All right, so that was just a little brief information. I'm gonna have to look more into that, but yeah, Black women played a role in the suffrage. They were fighting for the right to vote for a long period of time. So this is the information on the National Association of Colored Women Club. And this to show that these women indeed organized. Now, this is one of the unsung group of all time. These particular group have not been taught in the public schools or in colleges and university. It depends on what college you go to. Right? So on this day, they still around as we know it. You just may not hear the name, but that's the historical facts. That's the historical information. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for tuning in. And if you guys want to support this channel, please make sure you share and subscribe and like the page. If you guys are on Facebook, please go ahead and share this video. And if you guys want to support me and what I'm doing, you can also send to my Cash App, $tip word. If you want to contribute, if you want to support, I'll gladly appreciate that. And that's on you. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, please take it easy on yourself and be safe out there. So with that being said, may peace and power elevation be to all of you. And please motivate yourselves. Please get the knowledge, get the understanding, get the wisdom. I'm doing this on a daily basis, and I'm making it my business to do so because I see there's a lot of things that we're lacking of, and we don't really know about. So, as I'm sharing information with you, I'm also receiving information for myself. So I do not have all the answers. All right. I do not know everything. All right. Life is an ongoing, quest, and you're going to always be on the quest for knowledge. So I'm going to show you this African symbol before I leave out. It's a Adinkra symbol. All right, so all right, this symbol is called Ni Anum. Ni Anum means that he who doesn't know anything learns by knowing. So it represents knowledge and learning. It comes from the Proverbs that he who does not know can know from learning. So this is one of my favorite symbols of all time, because it represents knowledge and learning. So you're going to always continue to grow, and you're going to always continue to acquire the knowledge. As a matter of fact, oh shit. There it goes again, right there. Ni anum nosua a ohu. Ni anum nosua a ohu. He who does not know can know from learning. Symbol of knowledge, lifelong education, and continued quest for knowledge. So, with that being said, stay on your quest for knowledge. Stay on your quest for knowledge. If you don't do anything else, because you ain't gonna never stop learning. It don't matter how old you get, you're gonna be exposed to new ideas that you have not been exposed to in your lifetime. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna be exposed to things, you're gonna be like, oh, well, this is different. So that's what life is all about. You live to learn, and you learn to live. But anyways, Until next time, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully, I can do a video later on. And as the Muslim would say, inshallah, or as I would say, if the Creator wills it so. So, with that being said, y'all take it easy. May peace and power elevation be to all of you. And thank you for watching. And thank you, sister, for watching. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for tuning in. So make sure if you really like this video, go ahead and share the video. If you really like the channel, my YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe and share and like the channel. And I'm out. All right. Deuces.